African Americans. In 1947, Denver residents knew it was Howdy Doody time, as the first episode of that show was telecast, and they also knew it was time for a new library building that wasn't as dark, cramped, and old-fashioned as Old Main on Bannock Street. Voters passed a $2.5 million bond issue, and the first design proposal was to link a new structure with Old Main via a glass-walled arcade. Eventually, however, the Library Commission settled for a brand new building at 14th and Broadway to be designed by Fisher & Fisher and Burnham Hoyt. The new building, completed in 1956, was constructed as the expandable first stage of a larger structure and wasn't expected to serve the city's needs beyond a decade or so. The absence of fixed interior walls and built-in shelves was to allow flexibility for future changes. Books were transferred from Old Main via a conveyor belt bridge. A pneumatic tube system linked departments with basement stacks, where employees on roller skates, who prided themselves on skill and accuracy, hustled to fulfill requests. Children enjoyed the carousel, and groups such as the Denver Symphony Orchestra took advantage of the meeting rooms. But by 1967, Denver had already outgrown the 16 miles of shelving, wire auditorium, and the fourth-floor space allocated for the internationally renowned Western History Department.
I especially fancy the main library with its great glass rotunda poking into Civic Center Park. Thank heavens that this building is part of the grand new library.
Denver's grand new library is correct. The $91.6 million bond issue that passed by a landslide of Denver voters in 1990 financed construction of 4 new branch libraries, renovation of 15 existing branches, new books, equipment, furniture, and the construction of the new Michael Graves-designed Central Library. Founding Father John Cotton Dana's words continue to echo into the 21st century as Denverites gaze upon and utilize their wonderful new facility. For it was Dana, the city's first librarian, who said, "Progress comes naturally. It is merely the Denver atmosphere of wishing to do things better than they were done before."
It's time to BYOB. Bring your own bag, that is. To the grocery store, the liquor store, the hardware store, and all retail stores in Denver. Starting July 1st, remember to bring your own bag when you shop. All retail stores will charge 10 cents for each plastic or paper bag provided at checkout. By bringing your own bag, you will help reduce waste, prevent litter, and protect our rivers and streams. Every year, Denver residents use over 100 million disposable bags. So Denver will give away reusable bags to help you make the switch. Find more information at denvergov.org/bringyourownbag. Bring your own bag. Keep your change.
Welcome to the Finance and Governance Committee of Denver City Council. This meeting of the Finance and Governance Committee begins now.
Everyone, thanks so much for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Amanda Sawyer, Denver City Councilwoman for District 5, and today I have the honor of taking over as chair of the FinGov Committee. So Thanks so much for being here. Before we get started with introductions, Councilwoman Black has chaired this committee for a number of years, and last week, on her last opportunity, she was absent and attending via Zoom. So I wanted to just see if you had anything you wanted to say or offer you a minute since you're in person today.
Thank you. I had COVID, which was why I was home, virtual. Totally fine now, testing negative. Anyway, I am now the vice chair, and I'm really excited for Councilwoman Sawyer to chair this committee. I think she'll do a great job. And our committee is virtually the same people, except for she is replacing Councilman Clark, who's moved to a different committee, but Councilwoman Sawyer always attended this committee anyway, so she's going to do a great job as chair.
Well, thank you so much. And I think we have Councilwoman Seda-Baca online as well. Should we start introductions online?
Awesome. Thank you. Good afternoon, Candy Seda-Baca, District 9.
Wonderful. And why don't we start in chambers all the way to my left, and we'll go back to Councilwoman Black.
Kendra Black, District 4.
Jamie Torres, District 3.
Chris Hines, Perfect 10.
Perfect, thank you. So today we've got two action items. The first one is 220832, which is rescinding $154,000 from the general fund contingency for the city attorney's office for some staffing positions. So I'm looking out in the audience. Who do we've got? Marley, are you presenting for us today? Great.
Good afternoon, Councilwoman Sawyer. Kristen Bronson should be on the line, and she will be presenting, doing the main portion of the presenting for us.
Perfect, thank you. Is she available?
Can you guys hear me? Hello? Sound-wise. I'm not sure you guys, can you hear me now? I don't think it's working. All right, Marley, I think you're going to have to go.
Hear me? Can you let her know that we can hear her, please?
Okay, good. All right, if you can hear me, then I'm going to go ahead and go. I'm not sure why I'm having troubles hearing you, but I'm going to jump in and hope that that fixes itself. Hello, council members. Really great to see you all. I'm sorry I'm at an educational program out of state, and so joining you virtually today. But I did want to make sure you knew that in the room, in addition to my presenting our PowerPoint here, we have folks from finance, folks from DPD. I think our chief is there. And we have U.S. Attorney Cole Finnegan also available for questions, but I do plan to go ahead and give the presentation and then open it up for questions. And because I'm struggling a little bit to hear, my apologies if you interject with a question. I may not hear it, but I'm going to do my best. So hopefully the technology will work. We come to you today on a supplemental budget request, and this is for a proposal, an investment that we're making in tackling some of the surging gun violence problem that we have seen in Denver. And this is a new partnership and a deepening of our partnership with the U.S. Attorney's Office. So here is an outline of what we're going to discuss today, the funding proposal, why we are engaging in this partnership, a little bit of the crime statistics around gun violence in the city, and how details around our partnership, and then we'll have opportunity for Q&A. So starting with the funding proposal, first I want to say that this proposal came out of the mayor's 2022 public safety plan around trying to get some of the illegal guns that are on our streets off our streets, trying to protect the public in some of these higher level, more serious gun cases. But it is also a measure that is very consistent with this city council's long legacy around gun regulation. And so we are excited to bring it to you all today. The idea was born out of a partnership that started about a year ago between DPD, the city, and the U.S. Attorney's Office with a more concentrated effort around gun cases, and particularly felons, dangerous felons that are found illegally to be in possession of firearms. This is a quote from our U.S. Attorney for Colorado, Cole Finnegan. And I think the U.S. Attorney came in to his new position and was concerned, and a priority was around gun violence. And that is something that, as a resident of Denver for many, many years, and of downtown, something that he was very concerned about. And so he did approach us, along with other communities, about the possibility of bringing greater resources to bear in the prosecution of gun crimes at the federal level. So as I mentioned, he's come to other communities. The first of those was Aurora, that has agreed to add a special, something what we're calling SAUSA, which is a Special Assistant U.S. Attorney position to prosecute these gun cases. SAUSAs are a model that the Department of Justice has used for many years across the country to tackle special needs areas where there is a particular problem in a community or a particular type of crime that needs to be prosecuted at the federal level, but that can really be better done in partnership between local governments or DA's offices and the federal government. The other two communities that are considering the establishment of SAUSA units are also Colorado Springs and Pueblo. So the details, what is it we're requesting here? We're looking to create a SAUSA unit as within the city attorney's office. This would consist of 4 associate assistant city attorneys. They would deal specifically with gun cases coming out of Denver, and a specific kind. Again, these are felons, dangerous felons that are found illegally to be in possession of a firearm. The specific federal statute is 18 USC section 922. The positions would be housed for budget purposes within our prosecution and code enforcement section of the city attorney's office. We would work in partnership with the U.S. Attorney's Office to hire, recruit, retain, train these attorneys. We have an intergovernmental agreement that we have worked on together collaboratively that really just discusses how the offices will work together. They would physically be housed out of the U.S. Attorney's Office while they would be funded by the city and county of Denver, at least under our proposal. And our expectation or hope is that once these folks are trained and really up and running, that they should be able to handle between 30 and 40 cases per attorney annually. And again, they will only be working on Denver cases. So while the U.S. Attorney's Office has prosecutors that work in this area currently, it's not we need to be doing more. And certainly the surge in gun violence that we've seen warrants a greater investment. But unlike the prosecutors in the U.S. Attorney's Office currently that may get a case from anywhere across the state, because they deal with a very large region, the entirety of the state, these SAUSAs will only handle Denver cases. So as I said, 4 SAUSAs would be added to the CAO budget. This budget number has been revised from when we briefed many of you all, simply because of the passage of time, some delays in terms of scheduling. We're starting the hiring process a little bit later. So I think when we originally spoke with some of you, this number was higher, but currently what we're asking for in this supplemental is $154,000 to come from our general contingency fund, which would cover 4 months of salaries and benefits for these individuals. This would be a short-term ask. It's really a stopgap measure to address the surge in gun crime. We envision these being a little over 2-year limited positions. We would hire them now, be training them this fall, and then continue to request those salaries as part of the CAO's 2023 and 2024 budget submissions. What kinds of cases are we talking about? Well, the U.S. Attorney's Office employs a very data-driven approach, and they do that in combination with Denver's Crime Lab and the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, or NIBIN. Our Crime Gun Intelligence Center, all of these are really nationally known and recognized organizations that help give us a lot of really critical information about the guns that when shell casings are found, we can create what is effectively a history of that gun, a story of where that gun has been used in the past. And so as the U.S. Attorney's Office and as the SOUSes are reviewing these cases for prosecution, they really are looking for individuals that present a danger to the community. And that's either through their own personal criminal history, that would be a violent criminal history, or one where the gun itself that they are found illegally to be in possession of is one that has been used in other violent incidents. So again, a little bit about state law and why we're pursuing this partnership at the federal level. Under state law, possession of a weapon by a previous offender, or what we call PALPO, is also a crime. But the state law does not align exactly with federal law, and that's not unusual. Not every criminal law is the same at the state level or the federal level. And the federal level in this instance just offers us greater tools to prosecute some of these dangerous individuals that are breaking the law. Under the state law, PALPO can only be charged for a limited number of felonies, ones that are specifically under the Victim Rights Act. So if an individual is found who's convicted of a felony, found in illegal possession of a weapon, if that prior felony was under the Victim Rights Act, they can be prosecuted under state law. And as you'll see in a little bit under our crime statistics, our district attorney is doing a great job of pursuing those cases and has been pursuing more and more of those cases as we've seen this crime surge, or surging gun crime. But we need to similarly double down at the federal level, because there are many instances where individuals felons may be illegally in possession of a gun, but they are not prosecutable under state law. And so the gun, while illegally in the possession of that individual, is not something that we could seize under state law. It would be something that we could seize under federal law. A good example of that was the Maven Hotel incident that many of us may remember. It was big in the newspaper. There were individuals found at the Maven Hotel during the All-Star game with what could effectively be described as an arsenal of weapons. Those individuals, many of them did have felonies. One of those individuals, just by way of example, was named G. Rodriguez. That individual was a felon, 3-time felon, but those felonies were for escape or for drug charges. And those are not felony convictions for which the district attorney could prosecute under the Victim Rights Act today. And so this is the type of case where, in lieu of not prosecuting that case or not being able to seize those weapons, we want to make sure that those kinds of cases, something like this, can be pursued under federal law, and with our partners at the U.S. Attorney's Office, be able to seize those weapons and pursue charges. The next slide shows the elements of the charge under this federal statute. So again, the request is for 4 attorneys. They will be pursuing criminal charges under this statute exclusively. And we do think that these are elements that are, again, broader and more accessible in terms of prosecuting the illegal gun charge than at the state level. And they are ones that, we can pretty much make if a felon is found illegally in possession of a weapon. The fact that they know they have that weapon or that ammunition, the fact that they had been convicted of the felony and that they knew that, and a felony here is defined as a crime punishable by 1 year or more in prison. Also that while they were possessing the firearm, they knew they'd been convicted of a felony. I think I mentioned that. And then finally, that the firearm or ammunition at some time was moved from one state to another or from a foreign country into the United States. This element is actually quite easily proven because most guns are not necessarily made in Colorado. So from the time of manufacture and sale to the time that they're found illegally in the possession of the felon, they have moved across state lines. So a little bit about the crime surge that we are seeing, specifically gun crime. These are just a few of the headlines that we've seen of late relating to shootings in our community. The next slide talks about the PALPO cases. So again, that's possession of a weapon by a previous offender. These have more than doubled between 2014 and 2021. The next slide shows some of the data behind that chart. And what you see here is that in 2021, we saw a nearly 35% increase over the prior 3 years in terms of felons that are found to be in possession of illegal firearms. Aggravated assault, so shootings, these have more than doubled from 2014 to 2021. And if you look at the next slide, you see some of the statistics behind that chart, an average of over 1,200 cases filed annually. In 2021, again, another nearly 35% increase over the prior 3 years. And then we have already about 784 cases that have been filed this year. There's been a lot of talk about our murder rate that is spiking and is expected to hit a 20-year high this year. That is an unfortunate and tragic reality, and the human suffering we have seen from the murder rate, the vast majority of which involve a gun, a firearm, has taken a real toll on our community. The next slide is interesting because it does show some of our neighboring communities. And as I mentioned, both Aurora and Colorado Springs are considering adding SOUSes in addition to Denver. Aurora, I think, as I mentioned, has approved one already, but Colorado Springs is looking into that as well. This is a problem in a lot of urban areas across the country. Denver is not unique. We, like many cities, have seen have seen a historic high in the number of guns that have been that are available and in possession out on our streets, and certainly have seen a dramatic rise in the amount of gun violence. And as I say, that's common of a lot of our peer cities. So this is something that we feel demands urgency and as I say, short-term sort of stopgap measure to hopefully ebb the tide here. So a little bit again about how we are partnering to thwart gun violence. We see this as a mutual opportunity, a chance to hold felons accountable for illegally possessing firearms that they know they are not supposed to possess, and hopefully reducing the number of guns out on the street illegally, and the ones that are in the hands of the most violent offenders and those folks that are willing, unfortunately, to use a firearm to hurt others. And then we're, of course, hoping that Denver can, like Aurora, serve as a model for other jurisdictions on how they too can partner to bring greater resources and really deepen the bench when it comes to pursuing some of these higher level, more violent offenders that are illegally possessing and using guns. The money will come from the general fund contingency, and we have a legal basis for doing that. We are not concerned about the state of the contingency. As I said, we're looking at about 154,000 this year from the budget for 4 attorney positions, FTEs. They would be limited. But if you look at the chart on the contingency fund, you'll see that 154,000 is a little bit of a drop in the bucket at this point. It's not a significant investment, and we do feel that the 160 or so plus or minus cases that we think we can bring, and the number of seizures of guns that will come along with those cases can hopefully make a dent in our gun crime problem. Here is our timeline. We're before you today at FinGov, and hoping to get this committee's approval to pass through our supplemental budget request. The hope is that if this proceeds through to full city council approval, we could potentially get our job posting up before the end of August. We have agreed to the language of that job posting, so we're poised and ready to move forward. We would launch our hiring process in September. And then, as I mentioned, we'll continue to include these positions for the next 2 years in the city attorney budget. So with that, I will pause and open it up for questions. If I can't hear you guys or respond, I'm sure my team will jump in. So thank
you. But want to just double check that. And also wanted to acknowledge our U.S. Attorney, Cole Finnegan, who has joined us. Thanks for being here in person today. Before we get started with questions, did you want to add anything?
Well, 2 things. First, I apologize for being a few minutes late. I thought the hearing was after your first hearing, so I apologize. Second, it's nice to be back in this chamber. I've spent a lot of time of my life in this chamber. And third, I guess I would just say this, we would really welcome the opportunity to build upon the partnership that we've had for the past year with the city and county of Denver, certainly working with Chief Payson, working with Kristen and the city attorney's office, and working with the entire government to try and look for ways to aggressively attack violent crime. So we're certainly here willing and able to answer questions today, and we certainly would welcome this opportunity to continue and amplify our partnership with the city and look for creative ways to use the federal law that would allow us to take guns away from felons who are committing violent crimes. So thank you.
Thank you. And I want to also acknowledge that Councilwoman Kinich and Councilwoman Ortega have joined us. Let's start with questions from Councilwoman Kinich.
Thank you, Council Chair, and congratulations on your new role, and appreciate your new position. So I really appreciate this team reaching out. I have had a number of questions, and I did try to work on some of them ahead of time, but to be honest, just ran out of time. So I have a number of questions. I really want to just start by saying I think this is a really innovative approach, and the case making on the need to get guns off the street is very clear. So I don't have any concerns with the case making. All of my concerns are about the details of how we got to the exact proposal. So my first question is, I was going to ask how many of these offenses are happening a year in Denver that got us to the estimate that we needed for individuals. I see slide 18 has 452 possession of a weapon by previous offenders, but it doesn't use the word felon. So I wanted to just ask, is 452 the number for the potential pool of cases that could be prosecuted in this case, or is that maybe including misdemeanor offenders and other types of offenders who wouldn't be eligible? So I just didn't know if we were comparing apples to apples on slide 18.
I believe that those are only felons and that we are comparing apples to apples. Yes, Councilwoman.
is that how you got to the assumption that you wanted 4? One of my questions was, this is a totally new thing. Why not start with 1 or 2 and ramp up? But talk to me about your decision to start with 4 positions right off the bat.
Sure. Well, I think the number was actually higher, and we brought it down to 4 because we, in discussions with finance, we wanted to work within the budget constraints and anticipated needs within the contingency fund. So actually the number was a little bit higher when we first started talking about it. I think we looked at caseloads. We looked at obviously space considerations. The U.S. Attorney's Office is going to physically house these individuals. There are also efficiencies in hiring everyone at once. A great deal of efficiency if we can have the team all start at the same time, get trained at the same time, learn from each other, work together. So I think Chris Larson, who is in the U.S. Attorney's Office and will be directly supervising and overseeing this unit. I think our hope and expectation was that in bringing them on at once, that it would be the best in terms of ensuring thorough training, ensuring consistent training, and getting them to kind of get up to speed together.
Okay, thank you. My next question was about how many cases that the U.S. Attorney's Office is doing under the statute today. And, you know, not to get too fine a point on it, but if we're putting our resources in with 4 prosecutors, what my hope is that you're not doing Denver cases with your existing attorneys. What I don't want us to do is subsidize, right, additional representation for other parts of the state. So, you know, the agreement doesn't have a hold harmless, like we commit to not reducing the number of cases we do in Denver just because, you know, I know that this is not the same as other types of funding streams, but I am interested in kind of making sure that we're not just changing Denver cases from federal prosecutors to Denver prosecutors and getting the same quantity or, you know, only a slight increase. Are we really going to get, you know, is this 100% increase in prosecutions that these dollars represent? Does that make sense?
Currently, we prosecute about 100 cases statewide, Palpo cases. But I think the distinction that I want to make sure we're really focusing on is under the federal law, we don't have the restrictions or the limitations that exist under state law.
Right.
So there are certain cases that you cannot prosecute under state law, even though it may be a violent offender with a gun, which we would have the ability to prosecute pursuant to the federal law. And so what we're able to do through our partnership is as cases come through, there are additional cases that qualify for prosecution under federal law. So what the city attorney, you know, ably said, and which I will certainly support, is we believe with these additional attorneys, they allow us to do an extra 30 to 40 cases per year, where we can bring charges under federal statutes and go after felons with guns. Does that answer your question?
Not really. I hear you, and everything you're saying makes sense. I'm asking a different question. So if you have 100 of these cases a year statewide, what percentage of those cases are in Denver?
I'd have to go back and look.
I
would tell you, if you look at the rise in violent crime across the state, Denver and Aurora are always the top cities.
So a significant portion. So let's say 60, 70 cases. Here's what I want reassurance of. I want reassurance that you're not just sending 60 or 70 cases to our 4 new prosecutors, and we're only seeing a net increase of 80 additional prosecutions. What I want an assurance of is that these are all net additional prosecutions. Your prosecutors that you're funding will continue to prosecute cases in Denver too, also, as they have been. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but as we bring new prosecutors on, we'll have a pool of prosecutors, and we will certainly prosecute crime in Denver going forward. And obviously, it's a program. We can certainly look at it at different points midway through the year and see. I think in the contract it provides that it's revocable at either side's request.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I don't know if Kristen wants to speak to this, but Kristen, I hope you hear that I believe in increasing prosecutions for these gun offenses. What I don't want to do is have us pick up the tab for a federal responsibility.
Well, I guess I want to push back a little bit. We're going to prosecute these crimes. We have 45 prosecutors for 5.8 million people. We're going to prosecute Palpo crimes.
Right.
And we're just looking for creative ways to be able to prosecute more crimes.
Yeah.
And our commitment certainly was, with this partnership, we will commit to prosecuting these cases in Denver.
Yeah, Kristen, do you understand my question? Do you want to chime in? Did you guys have this conversation about not just transferring cases from federal prosecutors to Denver-funded prosecutors, but making sure that it was net additional? Do you want to speak to this?
I understand what you're saying. And again, our belief is that these would be 30 to 40 additional cases, that this is additive in nature, not that we would be creating a new budget opportunity within the U.S. Attorney's Office to prosecute cases in Durango or somewhere else. That is not the intent. We've had a year-long partnership on gun crimes between DPD, the city, and the U.S. Attorney's Office. And this was really born out of that partnership in finding that additional resources could mean additional guns off the street and additional prosecutions. And so that is, as I understand, and in my discussions with the U.S. Attorney's Office, that is the intent behind this very agreement.
My question would be, I would love to see the data in the agreement to back that up, which is what's the baseline number of Denver prosecutions today? And then what we do is we track the Denver prosecutions done by federal prosecutors along with the prosecutions done by the Denver prosecutors, so that a year from now, I can see that it wasn't just that they transferred all the Denver cases to the Denver-funded prosecutors, and we don't have the net increase that we anticipated. So I don't see any mechanism. And again, this is not about this is not about trust of individuals. It's about the idea that any of us could be in our positions or not the next day. Intent gets lost along the way. That's why we have agreements. So I guess my request would be that perhaps there's a conversation about baselining that data and then tracking it so that we're clear that the intent is not just the transferring of Denver cases from one budget to the other budget. So if you want to speak to that, you can. Otherwise, I'll give you a chance to regroup and get back to me after committee, perhaps. If either. And Councilwoman Kinich, we do have two other members in the queue, and I'd like to finish this discussion by 2:15 because we've got a second contract coming through. So if there are further questions, would you mind going to the back of the queue, and then we can circle back with you? Yeah, I do have additional questions, so I'm happy to go to the back of the queue. Thank you. Great, thank you. Let's go online to Councilwoman Sitabaca, please.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to call for a voice vote on this when we do vote, because I have many of the same questions that Councilwoman Kinich has, and I asked them in my briefing, and I have yet to be provided the analysis of the cases that would be eligible. I would like to see a spreadsheet of the current cases that are reflected on the bar graph, and then the breakdown of which ones would be eligible to be prosecuted at this level, and what exactly we would be prosecuting for. I'm not super clear on if we're just going for the gun possession component, or if we're going after whatever other crime catalyzed us finding out that they were felons with a gun. And so I would like that analysis, because I do think it's important for us to understand, because we essentially are subsidizing the federal government's work. And so I want to see the exact translation and be able to monitor it. And I would like a component of this to propose some element of how the public can track this for transparency purposes. It would be nice to have some kind of public facing database where we could see at any given point the caseloads or something like that, so that we know exactly what's happening with these dollars. Because right now it's $154,000, but next year it's over $500,000. And so I don't know how we plan to continue going forward with it. And I would just like that transparency piece and that tracking piece. That's my request. Thank you.
Councilwoman Ortega.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first question is for Kristen. So the budget amount that would be requested over the next 2 years, will that come out of the city attorney's budget?
Yes, we are including it this year as one of our expansion requests, but it would be put into our budget requests for 2023 and 2024.
And then are you anticipating that the data is provided to your office from the results of the work that will be done by these attorneys? And do you anticipate sharing that with City Council as well?
Happy to share it with City Council. We definitely plan on tracking that. And as I said, we're working very closely with the U.S. Attorney's Office. I've got, they are going to be city attorneys. They are going to be city employees. And so I will, necessarily need to keep very close tabs on the work, their performance, their progress, productivity. All of that's going to be something we're going to be working in tandem with Chris Larson and the U.S. Attorney's Office as the group is stood up, trained, and begins prosecuting cases. Happy to report back to City Council on the progress there. That's something that we have discussed and had anticipated doing and are happy to do.
Just suggest to the chair of the committee that maybe so many months down the road, I think it'll take a while to ramp up, have the folks onboarded and start working on cases, maybe 6 months down the road or so. Put it on the calendar for a check-in to maybe see what those findings are. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilwoman Ortega. And I appreciate that question. It was something that we had discussed as well. Because this is not an ordinance of any kind, there's no sort of way for us to benchmark, but I would like to ask, for a progress report on the success of those 4 positions and the value that they're adding to the community. So thanks for pointing that out. Councilwoman Kniech, we've got a couple more minutes if you'd like to come back up.
Yeah, just 2 last questions. The first is, it's my sense that your prior felony is what triggers the federal law, but the current thing you might be picked up for may or may not be a felony or a misdemeanor. I'm a little curious about why this is coming from the municipal prosecution division versus the DA's office. And, I would assume that the odds are if you're picked up with a gun, you're more likely to be in the felony category, which wouldn't be cases that our attorneys would be prosecuting. It would be Beth McCann's attorneys. So I'm just curious about the decision to do this from the city versus the DA's office.
Yeah, I'm to that. Thank you. We've certainly talked to the district attorney. We've talked to a number of district attorneys. I can tell you that, we're working with the city and county of Denver. We're working with Aurora. I'm in conversations with Jeff Chostner, who's the district attorney in Pueblo. I'm in conversations with Michael Allen, the district attorney in Colorado Springs. We're trying to have as many partnerships as we can. What makes this more consistent in some ways is the ongoing partnership we have with the city and county of Denver. But certainly at some point that'd be great if the district attorney in Denver had personnel. I'm not sure she does right now.
Okay, so, but if it were the same amount of money, I'm just curious, we might not have access to the underlying case. Because I asked you a question, our U.S. attorney a question yesterday about, in theory, there's multiple crimes here, right? There's the underlying crime that got you arrested and brought you into our radar. And then there's this federal prosecution. And so, there's 2 cases now being done by different agencies. And so, but the other agency in this case is not the municipal, prosecution unit in most cases, is DA. So I'm just concerned about how it works practically on the ground in terms of coordination, and we may not have enough time, but I just didn't know if again, maybe the city has a comment on why they think that's not an issue, that, you know, a municipal prosecution unit that ordinarily would have no involvement in this case because it's a state offense that would go to the DA's office, right? Is that a problem that?
Well, I can speak. When I was the city attorney, we had conversations, you know, all the time with Mitch Morrissey and with John Suthers, or trying to recall, I think it was John Suthers a long time ago, I apologize, about how that was going. So
okay, maybe someone can a little bit from the city attorney's office afterwards, just in the interest of time. My last question is just, the agreement itself is not limited to gun offenses. And this was something I had asked about beforehand, and I appreciate you giving me a chance to read the agreement, but it says the attorney will work on matters or cases that are cases in which the agency is the originating agency or the lead agency, or in which the agency has a significant interest. If the intent is to limit this to gun cases in 18 USC, is it 233? Why is that not in the agreement? Because the agreement's very broad compared to the intent.
I think the answer to that is this is an agreement we use. We have special assistant U.S. attorneys across the United States that we work with, and this is a standard agreement that we work with.
And it might be on different offenses in different cities.
Yes, and I want to amplify my earlier response just to note, and I was speaking with Chris Larson, the Deputy U.S. Attorney, the U.S. Attorney's Office consults with the District Attorney's Office all the time. I mean, we look at cases and decide where to go with the cases, and obviously Chief Pazin and his team are part of that also.
So there will now be a 3-agency coordination instead of just 2.
Well, we'll probably have those conversations time to time.
Yeah, I guess maybe if the city team wants to get back to me as well. I understand it's a standard federal agreement, and maybe changing federal agreements is hard because then you have a lot of bosses who want to look at it. But it concerns me that it does not limit the types of offenses that our folks can be working on. I would prefer an agreement that said this is what we're working on. I don't, for example, want our U.S. attorneys to be involved in any cases involving any immigration offenses or other things, and this does not limit this. And so if we can follow up and talk more about that, I am not going to hold this up in committee, but you've heard I have a lot of questions. I hope to have some more follow-up, and I hope to get there by the time we get to the floor. But it does not have the benchmarks to protect us as a city or to limit the offenses in the way that I wish it would. So I'd like to understand more about why the city is proceeding with something so broad as a legal agreement, not your intent, but the legal agreement. So thank you.
Thanks, Councilwoman Kniech. And I just have one kind of wrap-up question, and I believe Kristen may have some final remarks that she wants to talk as well. Marley, in our briefing, did you tell me, and please, if I am mistaken, clarify, that some of our city attorneys are deputized already?
That's correct. All of the city attorneys in the prosecution and code enforcement section are specially deputized DAs through the Denver DA's office.
Got it. Okay, so then that means that there is some of that kind of coordination already. It's due to the code enforcement piece that those city attorneys.
We actually prosecute a multitude of state cases already, and we do that with the ongoing conversations and agreements with Beth McCann in her office.
Okay, great. Really appreciate that. Thanks for clarifying that.
Absolutely.
And does our city attorney want to have any final comments?
I was going to actually mention what Marley just mentioned, so thank you so much. My PACE team is always way ahead of me, so thank you, Marley. But also to say that, these folks are going to be functioning for all intents and purposes like a federal prosecutor. They will be prosecuting federal cases. And so the fact that a prior felony may have been one prosecuted out of the DA's office is not really any additional challenge, because right now the federal prosecutor might potentially work with the DA's office to get whatever they might need with respect to that prior felony. This would not be any different. So it doesn't add any additional relationship challenges that or relationship hurdles that aren't already there. But also just to say, we work really closely with the DA's office. I don't have any concerns with our ability from the law enforcement side here to work collaboratively on these cases. But we'll on the remainder of the questions before you guys get to full council, and would be happy to provide that information to all of the committee members. Thank you, Councilwoman.
Thank you so much. Per Councilwoman Sadabaca's request, do we have a motion to move this forward? And then let's go ahead and do a voice vote.
Baca?
No.
Councilwoman Sita Baca?
No.
Councilwoman Ortega? Councilwoman Kanich?
Aye.
Councilman Hines?
Aye.
Councilwoman Black?
Aye.
Councilwoman Sawyer?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-1.
Great, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time today. Thank you again for joining us, and we appreciate the follow-up on that. And with that, why don't we switch over to our next contract? And I also want to take a minute while we're moving here to just recognize that Chief Pazin is here today as well. Chief, sorry I didn't recognize you earlier. He's here, he was here, so thank you very much. Really appreciate it. All right. So let's move on. Our next contract is 22-810, approving a contract with FERCM for heavy towing services for the city of Denver. And we've got General Services joining us today. Please introduce yourselves and go ahead and get started.
Good afternoon. Woo, excuse me. Nicole Sedra, General Services Contract Administration Supervisor. Thank you for the time today to present the citywide on-call towing contract this afternoon. So I have here with our group, Andrew Amador, the Executive Director from General Services. We also have Laura Wachner, our Deputy Director of Department and Safety, and Adam Petro. He is unable to be with us today, but he's with Right-of-Way Enforcement. So today we're going to discuss and provide you some information. How about that? And give you a summary of the citywide on-call towing services contract for standard and heavy tows with FERCM Inc. This contract will be for towing of damaged or disabled city vehicles, also right-of-way enforcement towing needs, including towing of booted vehicles, clearing traffic lanes, and also special events such as Denver Bronco games and any concerts and public venues. Also, the contract will cover transport of all tows that are ordered by the vehicle impound facility and towing of vehicles and or equipment from the 22 various mountain park locations. I did want to preface that this contract would not include the initial towing of abandoned RVs, truck trailers, and campers, and that was not under the scope of work that we were trying to achieve. $8.6 million. So some of the problems with that is definitely tow rates paid by the city have not increased since that time. And also the Colorado Public Utilities Commission, those towing rates have also increased since 2016. So the solution that this contract provides is by using the contractor's towing software application, TowBook, it eliminates the cost of the tow ticket purchases that's actually required by the contractor. And TowBook provides a no-cost solution to the city to immediately alleviate the burden on 911 for those dispatching tow requests. Also kind of wanted to point out as well is the city is currently paying a $7 per tow subscription fee under the Tedesco contract. If the city chose to implement a full tow management system under that Tedesco contract, it could result in an additional $7 to $15 per tow fee above the current $7 that we're currently paying right now. So based just on the information of impound and abandoned vehicles from 2021, the cost savings could approximately be about $195,000 to $418,000. So we'll quickly talk a little bit about the response time. And so in the previous contract, the scope of work outlined that a response time was to be set at 20 minutes. And so knowing the process, a request was routed to 911. They would dispatch to initiate the tow request, and then the dispatcher will then call for the tow, provide the contractor with the location, all the information, and then the contractor will then turn around and dispatch a driver to the scene to remove that vehicle. So the issues that are kind of occurring with that old model is now both the city and the tow companies are being adversely impacted by labor shortages. Denver has experienced the 8.75% increase of growth population since 2016, which definitely impacts the vehicle movement in the city. And the 20-minute response time is just not reasonable. So this contract solution will provide that the contractor implement a widely used dispatching tow software application to address the tow request process versus the vehicle movement. Those are definitely immediate benefits, reduced wait times, relief to Denver 911 for the dispatching of those tow requests. And additionally, FERCM has used TowBook dispatch for tow requests since April 1st of this year. So they are using it on the back end of actually going ahead and initiating those tows to those contractors. So again, we'll go ahead and kind of look quickly at what the current state is. So right now, currently, tow requests call go into 911. 911 will then contact the tow company, and then the tow company will then use TowBook to dispatch the fleet. The future state is that the requester will make the tow request directly through an app, the TowBook app. The requester will then need to radio 911, and tow requests will then be noted in CAD. And then the tow company will use TowBook to dispatch the fleet. Now, the future state definitely removes the phone call traffic, which is going into 911 currently, and the use of TowBook allows 911 to easily access vehicle information, such as location, data, running up place, anything like that, if those calls come in to their office. Just to kind of give a little point of reference in the number of calls that have been going on. So from January 1st to 28th of this year, actually there was 1,700 calls that came in to 911. So it's averaging about 60.7 a day, and the estimated response time was 36.3 minutes. Now looking at the same 28-day period in June, there's actually 1,722 calls. Average calls per day increased a little bit, it's 61.5, but you'll see there was average response time reduction down to 25.6. So even not even being fully implemented, we can definitely see that there is a positive response. So last, we'll talk a little bit about the invitation for bid process. The scope of work and technical requirements included that the awarded contractor would have the ability to respond to impound tows, city-owned vehicle tows, the right-of-way enforcement tows, DPD auto theft tows, special event tows, and also being able and have the equipment to assist the mountain park tows. Response time in this new agreement was actually increased to 45 minutes. However, it was still 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. They were also required to have a fleet of records to go ahead and service the city, and they would also be required to implement a dispatching towing software application. Many agency partners came together to make sure that we were covering all the city's services needs. So Department of Safety, specifically the Police Department and Sheriff Department, also reached out and spoke with Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, which was the right-of-way enforcement. Had some calls and conversations with Department of Parks and Recreation, specifically mountain park locations. Also worked with Technology Services just to ensure that this dispatching towing software was going to meet all the city needs and requirements. And then General Services was the lead on this solicitation and contract execution. Did want to point out as well that there were 7 non-city pre-bid attendees, and we actually only received 1 bid proposal. So today we are here to ask for your support for Resolution 220810 to approve a contract with Burkham Inc. with an initial contract term beginning September 1st, 2022 through August 31st of 2025 with the option of 2 one-year renewals. The initial contract value of this contract would be $11.5 million. That would cover citywide towing service for Denver Police Department, Sheriff's Department, also right-of-way enforcement, and any other additional city agencies that may need service. So now we'll go ahead and open it to any questions.
Great, thank you so much. Really appreciate the presentation. And also wanted to acknowledge Division Chief Ron Thomas is joining us today from DPD. If there are any questions from council members about how our emergency first responders use towing services. So thanks so much for being here. Let's go to Councilwoman Ortega.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nicole, thanks for the presentation. Sounds like a lot of comprehensive work was done to try to pull this together, so I appreciate that. So the tows that happen, will they continue to go to the impound lot owned by the city and managed by our Sheriff's Department, or will some of them go to a privately owned lot that either this or one of the other 4 companies may own?
So the intent is to cover any vehicle impound requests. Also, there are some short tows that also are included in there. So if someone is in a driveway, they can actually move that from an illegally parked area just around the corner. So they're legally parked. But all the tows that are actually going to be needing to go to vehicle impound, they'll still go there. None of those tows are planned to go to any other sites.
That's important because I want to make sure we're not, like getting caught up in a different fee structure if they're being held at their own places, which some of them can be very, very expensive.
Yes, correct.
Okay. And then the Toolbook app, is that something that the previous company was utilizing? Is this something just isolated to, how do you pronounce them? The name of this company? Burkham?
Yeah.
So are they the only ones using it? Is this a platform being used across the country? Just curious about that.
So there are many towing dispatching softwares out there. Definitely in 2016, not 100% sure of how it was utilized, who was utilizing that. But Toolbook is something that Burkham has used in their current business model, as well as the 4 subcontractors that will be working under this agreement as well.
And how is it that our dispatchers can see that data? Is there some back connection?
Yes, so there will be sign-ins on different city agency partners where we can actually go in and extract data, see estimated call times, wait times, where the vehicle went, things like that. So there'll be certain levels of what data can be extracted.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Councilman Hines.
Thank you, Council Chair. And thank you for the presentation. Also, thank you for the opportunity to get a little bit of this information in advance. It helps me digest and digest the information. So part of the time for response is because of the workflow as well. And I'm using workflow to try to be as generic in the process as possible. So let me see if I have the workflow accurate. So if there's let's say that there's a crash and a police officer's there and identifies that the vehicle is inoperable and needs to be towed away from the scene. So would the officer then call a tow company? Would they call 911? Would they radio dispatch 911? Or how does that process work?
I'm going to ask Jody Slate to come on up and kind of cover that with you. What we really would like, our intent is that everything can be done on a personal device, a cell phone, so that they can go ahead and think of it as like an Uber app to request that tow. But I'm going to let Jody kind of talk about what the current process is and what they'd like to do to roll that out.
Yeah, and if the current process does have this Uber app, I'd be curious to see how that works too.
Hi, my name is Jody Slate. I'm the operations manager for Denver 911. Thank you for your time. The process as it stands now, an officer would radio requesting a tow. Denver 911 personnel then actually makes a phone call to the tow company, documents it in the CAT incident. If there are any requests for ETAs throughout that process, it's an additional phone call. Some of the avenues that we receive the tow requests are either via phone call, mostly by radio when it comes from an officer, and sometimes via email when it's through right-of-way. Anytime we handle a tow at 911, it's a phone call. So it takes my personnel off the phones by being able to just request the tow through the Towbook app.
And what is this? So far, I haven't heard anything about an Uber app on someone's phone. So is that something that is something that we want to do that isn't currently being performed, or?
The Denver 911 would use a desktop version of the software. The DPD officers out on the field would be using an app. So I'm not familiar with the functionality of the app itself, other than they can request the tow on their own. If they're in an unsafe situation and they need dispatch to request it, they can just radio that, and we can do it via the software as opposed to making a phone call.
I think Division Chief Thomas has a comment to add here as well. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Chair Division Chief Thomas. I think to get to the root of your question, so this Towbook system has the capacity to identify where the closest tow is and direct that tow. One of these four, FERCM and his four subcontractors direct that particular tow to the location. I think the previous system, a phone call was made to Extreme, and Extreme just said, hey, I need a driver over here, and it may not have been the closest tow, and there's certainly no consideration of these four other subcontractors. So I think this dispatch system allows some efficiency so that the closest tow and the most appropriate tow, because we've had situations where we've called for a tow, the tow gets there, it turns out not to have the ability to move this particular vehicle. So there's some efficiencies built in where we can take a picture or provide some information that then goes to Towbook, and then they can make sure that not just the closest, but the most appropriate tow vehicle is delivered.
And that's all related to Towbook.
Correct.
And then this Uber app, is that an officer would have on their phone?
So yeah, so I think that this would be something that would be on all of the officers' mobile platforms as well as in dispatch. So it can be summoned from either source.
And this is Towbook functionality.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Committee Chair.
Thanks, Councilman Hines. Councilwoman Black.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Cammie, you sent out a map that says density tows.
I did.
And I'm just looking at it for the first time today and noticed that my district has a lot of tows, and I'm very familiar with this neighborhood. And while it's not identified by the city as an S neighborhood, it's a very high-need, low-income neighborhood. And I'm just wondering what kind of tows those are in that neighborhood.
Sure.
I mean, it's almost as many as are in District 9.
Absolutely. I received that map from our partner here, Chief Thomas, so I'll ask him to comment on what he provided us for that summary.
So unfortunately, I can't provide a lot of detail there. That particular information was requested by Councilwoman Sita Baca. relative to where tows are coming from. And so I was able to provide that detail, I think specific to council district as to where tows were coming from, but I didn't get the detail as to what those tows were for. Were they for stolen cars? Were they for, misparked vehicles, things like that? So I can certainly obtain that and provide that for you.
I know you really care about District 4, so if you could just find out and let me know, I'd really
Certainly.
appreciate it.
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
You good? Yep. Okay, great. Thank you. I just have a couple of questions because this is my favorite kind of contract and on-call contract about the back-end reporting. So, we have other agencies that use on-call contracts and do not report them, the use of them to council. Both Dottie and the airport now have changed their practices so that they report to us quarterly on the usage of the contracts. Wondering whether there's a plan for general services, especially given how many kind of different agency hands are in the pot when it comes to using this contract, to maybe do some of that reporting.
Yes, we can definitely do that. Any requests that for encumbrance that come against that contract come to my department. So we definitely track usage year over year. Any change order requests, again, those come through us. So we are also looking at financial spend. And our division will actually also have a sign-in, so I'm able to pull data reports and share that when needed at any time.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic if you can maybe even just email us quarterly reports on the usage of the contract. It would be valuable for us because, the old contract was 2016,
right.
And $4 million less, I guess. And so, we're looking at a significantly larger contract this time around. Why is that? What's the differential there?
So I would say really price increase, right? We're looking at prices from 2016, labor costs, so that's kind of really what played into that. And we've actually seen a natural progression of the number of requests. Just looking year over year data, the pricing has increased over year.
And those prices are set by the state, is that correct?
Yes, they are.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yep.
And is that an annual thing, or is there like a division of the state that sits around and decides how much each tow is going to cost, or how does that work?
I know a little bit more about towing than I would like to say, but yes, they actually are, every March they will go ahead and look at the increase, and it'll be based on a CPI index.
Okay.
So, yes.
Okay, and then, so this contract is with FERCM, but there are multiple providers, is that
There'll
right?
be 4 subcontractors under the agreement.
4 subcontractors,
Yes.
so 5 contractors total.
Yeah, our contract will be with FERCM. He will be our primary person that we'll work with, and then he has those relationships with the additional 4. They're kind of actually cut into 4 districts, so depending on where their home base is, that's the area that they would actually cover.
Okay, so kind of like to provide, as Chief Thomas was saying, that like location-based, focused response.
Exactly.
Okay. Do we have anything in the contract, so, through DISBO or one of our other alphabet soup agencies, to govern the relationship between the contractor and the subcontractor to ensure that that's a fair, and equitable relationship on the back end? We've got a lot of those kinds of contracts with our generals and our subs, like out at the airport. So curious whether something like that exists here.
So MWBE goal was not identified in the contract. Our contract, again, is just strictly with FERCM. There is a requirement in the contract of executive director approval from general services to add those subcontractors on there, but our relationship is not with the sub. It'll be directly with FERCM.
Okay. As the executive director, who's got that power, do you want to add anything, or?
I do not, but if the requests do come forward for additional data or additional subs or changing subcontractors out under the agreement, we'd be happy to take a look at that. And, we will keep our finger on the pulse to see how efficient this is working and if we need to make some nominal changes under the contract. But right now, we do not anticipate any.
Okay.
So, yes.
That's great. And can you introduce yourself for the record, please?
Apologies. Andrew Amador, the Executive Director of General Services.
Awesome. Thank you. I just want to ensure, I had 3 questions around this contract. the first is sort of from a customer service perspective, right? Like college me who got her car towed and was running around at 2 o'clock in the morning trying to find it. Are our residents going to have that experience under this contract, or is there, how do our residents find their cars?
So I don't want to give misinformation. I think I'm going to lean on the Department of Safety to tell us the protocols of how people find their car when it's missing or not in the same spot that they parked it in or is gone.
Okay, or so like our residents can call the police non-emergency number and say, think my car either got stolen or towed. Can you let me know if my car is on your list? Is that kind of how that works?
That would be the process, yes.
Okay, good to know. And then I think in terms of kind of like the economies of scale and the staff time and the districting, we kind of talked through those questions. And then on the transparency, accountability side, right, it's an on-call contract. As you know, I hate those. But really appreciate your willingness to, report on the back end so that we can ensure that we're looking at how much of the contract is being used and what that looks like. So appreciate that. Councilwoman Ortega, looks like you're back up.
I have just one last request, and this is something that I often request on any of our contracts, is just wanting to know who the principals are of the 4 companies. If you can just forward and share that info with us. Okay.
We can do that, absolutely.
Okay, great, thank you. Are you ready for,
Councilmember Hines just jumped in behind you.
Okay.
Thank you, Committee Chair. A request for you. Will you give me a couple peer cities where Towbook has been implemented, where they've got an Uber-style app where they can, have the police just call directly? I mean, that sounds pretty transformative and cuts out the radio communication from the officer to 911, and then the phone communication from 911 to the tow service, and then also whatever communication the tow service has to do to the individual driver. I'd be curious to learn about a couple peer cities about how Towbook has implemented this. Thank you. Thank you, Committee Chair.
Absolutely.
And
sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to offer to move this forward, but I forget we've got the pretty buttons.
Fantastic. We've got a mover and a seconder. Can we just move them? Can we move this? Do we need a voice vote? Perfect. Everyone thumbs up, ready to move this forward? Great. Then we're moving on to council. Thank you so much for being here. And we have a number of items on consent. So if anyone would like to ask any questions about that, let us know. Otherwise, we're adjourned.